In the past, on many occasions, I have spoken very highly of hunters and gatherers, and I do believe that they have lived much happier and healthier lives than we do today. They just lived as God intended them to live. And adult hunters and gatherers did not have to worry about all of the health problems and psychological problems that we have to worry about today. Hunters and gatherers weren't suicidal. They did not have to deal with insomnia, they did not have to deal with cavities. They did not have to deal with 90% of all known diseases that we know today. However, one thing that I want to make clear right off the bat is there's an idea nowadays that some people believe that hunters and gatherers were some sort of children of the flower that were very peaceful and kind, and the modern man is much crueler and much more violent than they were. And I want to make it clear that that's silly. Hunters and gatherers were vicious killers, and they murdered each other all the time. And there's nothing wrong about that. Actually, I find that endearing. We could use some of that today. So I have no illusions about hunters and gatherers being some sort of wild hippies. That is not why I look up to them. I simply believe that they lived as God intended them to, and they didn't have to deal with a lot of bullshit that we deal with today. But to be completely objective, hunters and gatherers weren't perfect. Because just like all human societies throughout our history, they were superstitious. And they were the most superstitious of them all. And that's something that I don't like at all. Even though I'm a very religious person, I hate superstitions. In this world, there is no magic, there is no ghosts, there are no miracles. Believing that is toxic and it's stupid. And we should all just stop believing those things. Because they really keep us down. And belief in those superstitions is something that seems to be inherent in humanity. And that is just very unfortunate, and I wish that wasn't the case. The worst kind of superstitions are those that make people mutilate themselves as some sort of ritualistic initiation ceremony. Now, all the manner of circumcisions and so on and so forth. That is just disgusting, and that's just the filth of humanity, and it shouldn't exist. And hunters and gatherers are very prominent when it comes to that. They very much like their ritualistic mutilations. Interestingly enough, southern tribes, those hunters and gatherers that live nearer the equator, seem to be much more prominent in those particular superstitions than hunters and gatherers that lived in colder climates. Why is that? I don't know. But it's a thing. But still, with all that kept in mind, keeping animals in sheds and chopping off their balls and keeping them chained up, or treating them like pets and then one day taking them behind the barn and whacking them over the head, it just seems kind of strange to me. I would very much like to see a more minimalistic version of farming, with herds of cows running around freely on wide plains, supervised by humans very minimalistically, guarded in order to ensure that they are not snatched by other groups of humans, something like that. In the past I have asked myself a question: could we potentially return to hunting and gathering? Well, probably not, but the answer to that question is not really relevant, because we will never return to hunting and gathering. Because let's assume that all of the countries on the world go back to hunting and gathering except for one of them. Well, that one country wins and takes over everybody else and enslaves them because it's more powerful. But we could potentially become a semi-neo hunting and gathering society, perhaps. We could go back on relying on wild foods, wild meats and wild plants a bit more than we do today. Wild animals plaguing the forests and destroying them are a problem in many places in the world, and reducing their numbers and eating them would help. It would help a lot. Animals like boars and deers are spreading like wildfire in some places, and modern hunters are not very competent in dealing with them. I've actually heard that some populations of boars live off of the bait that hunters leave for them in order to lure them in for the kill. So starting to rely a bit more on wild foods, especially after letting a large portion of the old forests to naturally come back to their rightful place, would perhaps be a very good thing. But to wrap up, all of the human societies throughout history were plagued by superstitions, and hunters and gatherers were the most superstitious of them all. But at the same time they were the healthiest and the happiest, and that is something to look up to. We could surely do with allowing a bit of nature to come back to our world, because contrary to the belief of some people, humans do need nature. In a world ruled by humanity, our majority of the world still needs to be in the control of nature, because otherwise humanity cannot exist. And in the end of the day, instead of looking backwards, we should look ahead, to become something better than humanity has ever been in the past. To ascend onto a higher level above all those limiting, stupid superstitions and rituals, and above the mistakes that our current civilization is making. The mistakes that will lead to its inevitable fall. The civilization will fall, but the people might survive and they might learn from it. Learn from its mistakes. So yeah, I think that's it for this video. Bye bye.